Hello, friends. This is the Netarts Friends Church podcast. We are Jesus people, Kingdom of God people, welcoming, yearning, sharing. And we're glad you're connecting here with us. We'd love to connect in person as well. If you're inclined to support this podcast or for more information, just hop on over to netartsfriends.org. That's netartsfriends.org. Let's jump into today's sermon. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self? Every day, your behavior is shaped by the things that you stand to gain and the things that you stand to lose. Every day you live in the tension of a push and pull that's shaping your behavior, potential gains and potential losses, things you're moving towards and things you're moving away from. And of course, we're all so different, so what sounds to one person like gaining the whole world sounds to someone else like gag me with a spoon. One man's trash is another man's treasure, as they say. What sounds absolutely terrifying to one person, someone else doesn't even blink at. And because of these differences, we sometimes fail to understand other people's motivations. We don't understand the way someone else experiences the push and the pull, the potential gains and the potential losses that are shaping their behavior. Some of your awareness of the push and pull happens above the surface. Some of it you are aware of. There are times that you can name your worries and your anxieties. You know who or what situation is feeling threatening. And there are times when you can name what it is that you want. You can name your hopes and your dreams. But just like an iceberg that carries a mass of material under the surface, sometimes you haven't even recognized how the push and the pull is affecting you. You become reactive, defensive, avoidant, mean, bossy, controlling, critical, withdrawn, needy, and you haven't even fully recognized why, like what's going on under the surface. Often the gains and the losses that are motivating and shaping your behavior are linked back to a much earlier season of life. Your behavior might be being shaped by dreams you had of life when you were, say, 10 years old or 16. And the reason you're chasing or pursuing or striving to gain whatever your version is of the whole world, gaining the whole world, it may not be completely connected to right here, right now. It might be a much younger version of yourself, a less mature self who's doing the chasing. A difficult or threatening experience might take you back to an experience of loss when you were much younger, say 12 years old. And so the person becoming so reactive in this situation right now is actually your much younger self, your wounded and afraid self. But you don't always recognize that's what's going on. All you know is that suddenly you're really upset. You're not handling the situation well. Everything in you wants to fight or run away or armor up or build defenses or strategize or prepare or worry or become anxious or angry, and you can't see beyond it. And emotionally, you're living out of a much younger version of yourself, out of an experience of loss from a much younger time in your life. So, a discussion question here, or a reflection question if you're connecting online. The push and pull of potential gains or losses can trap your thinking in the past or the future. What practices have helped you stay in the present moment? So just take a moment and reflect on that. All right. Luke chapter 9, 18 through 27. Once when Jesus was praying in solitude, and the disciples were with him, he asked them, "Who do the crowds say that I am?" They said in reply, "John the Baptist. Others, Elijah. Still others, one of the ancient prophets has arisen." Then he said to them, "But who do you all say that I am?" Peter said in reply, "The Messiah of God." He rebuked them and directed them not to tell this to anyone. He said, "The Son of Man must suffer greatly and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised." Then he said to all, "If anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. What profit is there for one to gain the whole world, yet lose or forfeit himself? Whoever is ashamed of me and of my words, the Son of Man will be ashamed of when he comes in his glory and in the glory of the Father and of the holy angels. Truly I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God." The image that everyone in ancient Palestine would have understood for gaining the whole world was Messiah. And the image of losing yourself, losing everything, was the cross. And Peter, speaking as the spokesperson for the 12, said to Jesus, "You are the Messiah. It's the Christ, the anointed one, the King." And the next line says, Jesus rebuked them. Now, up to this point, Jesus had only rebuked demons, fevers, the wind, and the waves, and now the disciples. It is sobering to recognize that it's possible that there are people who call Jesus King, Messiah, Christ, Anointed One, and yet they receive rebuke from Jesus. Our ideas of king do not always match Jesus's ideas of king. Now, messiahs were nothing new. In the 50 years before and after Jesus' birth, there were 30 different revolutionary movements, 10 different prophets who challenged the ruling authorities, 5 different self-appointed messiahs. New Testament scholar N.T. Wright says, "Messiahship, it seems, was whatever people made of it. There was no one picture of the Messiah within the Judaism of Jesus' day. The idea of Israel's coming king was one that different movements and different claimants could quite easily reshape around themselves, without anyone denouncing them for not having conformed to the commonly recognized ideal or portrait." When Peter says to Jesus, "You are the Messiah," and when Caiaphas says the same words, but as an ironic question, neither of them should be understood as either stating or asking whether Jesus thinks he is the incarnate second person of the Trinity. The Messiah was some kind of a picture of the King of the Jews. He was the focal point of the dream of national liberty. And as long as people were looking for a Messiah, that meant they could shape him to fit their dreams, which meant that ideas of the Messiah were not one thing. They were varied perceptions of what the Messiah would do. He would be a military leader who would fight Israel's battles. He'd be a religious reformer and bring the cleansing and restoration that people thought the temple needed. He would be a prophetic voice. He would bring deliverance. He would set up an earthly kingdom according to what people were dreaming of. And there were all different kinds of flavors of messianic expectation. If only the Messiah would come, then we would gain the whole world. Now, on the other side of the equation, the cross. The cross stood for the image of losing yourself, losing everything. So it's here that I need to show you a gory image. Please, no passing out. This is a human heel bone with a nail in it. So whoever this person was, they were crucified most likely by the Roman Empire. This skeleton, their skeleton, was discovered in Jerusalem in 1968. And it's kind of a hard image to look at. You might say, don't leave that image on the screen. But guess what the Roman Empire did? They left the image on the screen. They left crucified bodies hanging for days, for weeks, months, even years. People were crucified on trees and posts along the busiest highways and roads, on hilltops and at city gates, and the Romans left the bodies hanging. You couldn't just take the body down. You had to get permission. Thousands of people walked past them. Not only was crucifixion agonizing and brutal, it brought the pain of humiliation. In the ancient honor-shame-based culture, carrying your cross down the busiest roads and then being hung up naked to die, your body left to be eaten by the birds and the beasts, was the most extreme experience of abandonment and humiliation. It was the ultimate way of labeling someone as an outcast. Theologian and New Testament scholar Mark Baker says that by Roman law, no citizen could be disgraced through this dishonorable means of execution. The cross was reserved for insurrectionists, foreigners, and slaves. Rome achieved peace through brutality. Historians estimate the Roman Empire crucified 30,000 people. Those are the modest estimates. The ancient historian Josephus reports that at one point in the siege of Jerusalem, there were 500 people a day being crucified. You may have heard of the slave revolt of Spartacus, like they've made movies about it. It happened about 70 years before Jesus came along. In the wake of that slave revolt, the Romans crucified 6,000 people and hung their bodies along the busiest highway. It was called the Appian Way, a road that thousands of people walked on, and their bodies were left to hang for an entire year as a way of sending a message to any future insurrectionists. So what got you crucified wasn't petty crime. It was high treason, social rebellion, crimes against the state, insubordination to the king. Crucifixion wasn't just about punishment. It was about deterring future insurrectionists. The Romans understood the cultural power of crucifixion. For a lot of people, all they would have to do is witness one crucifixion, see one nailed foot, and they'd say, I'm never doing whatever it is that causes you to get nailed like that. As Norman Kraus says, the cross epitomizes human concepts of defilement and exclusion. Jesus says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross daily, and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self? Whoever is ashamed of me and my words, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his glory and in the glory of the Father and of the holy angels. Now, when you hear those words, take up your cross daily. When you look at an image of a cross or a crucifix, you aren't immediately remembering a past experience. You aren't immediately imagining a future experience. Most likely, your nervous system, your limbic system, doesn't spike, it doesn't go haywire. Your prefrontal cortex doesn't immediately go offline. You don't lose all rational thought. Your amygdala doesn't immediately take over as you go into your version of fight or flight or freeze. You aren't immediately ruminating in the past. You aren't replaying some awful experience, living and reacting out of a much younger, wounded, more fearful version of yourself. You aren't immediately catastrophizing about the future and all the awful things that could happen. And that is because you've never witnessed a real crucifixion. You don't carry memories of walking past a real human body left hanging on the side of a busy highway. When you look at those words, take up your cross daily. When you look at any image of a cross or a crucifix, your brain is probably still in thinking mode and your body doesn't tense up. But that doesn't mean that you don't have real experiences, cross experiences, I'm going to say, of loss, pain, humiliation, and abandonment in your past. It doesn't mean you don't ruminate on past experiences. It doesn't mean that you don't struggle to stay in the now because you encounter experiences that immediately throw you back into past experiences and you're now reacting out of a younger, more fearful version of yourself. This situation in the now is touching a cross experience from when you were 12 years old, and so you're reacting out of that version of yourself and you're thrown into fight, flight, or freeze, and there's no being in the now because you're completely engulfed by the past cross. You're catastrophizing about the future cross. I wonder, are there experiences of loss or pain from your past that function kind of like live wires? They cause fear to spark anytime you get close to them, anytime a situation smells even a whiff like an old cross, keeping you from embracing the cross today and following Jesus because you're spinning into fight, flight, or freeze. Jesus says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. Can you hear what Jesus is saying there about staying in the now, in the present moment? There was a study done at Harvard University that found that on average, we spend 47% of our time not thinking about what we're doing right now, not thinking about what's happening right now. That's almost half of the time that we have. We're not thinking about what's happening right now. We're stuck either in the past or we're stuck in the future. So, what does this mean for you to take up your cross daily? It does not appear that Jesus' disciples knew what to do with this until they actually witnessed Jesus carry his own cross and be crucified, and then his resurrection. How could the disciples take up their cross daily until they had seen Jesus in his own moment of complete abandonment? And so the question comes, what about the crosses in your own past? In order to be able to face the now, because so often we can't take up the cross daily right now because we've got these crosses in our past. In order to take up that cross now and love your enemies and forgive and practice the way of generosity and self-sacrifice, to follow Jesus today, to not be ashamed of his words, do you need a healing of your memories? Do you need to see Jesus in that cross moment. The Apostle Paul says, I am crucified with Christ, but often I think we tend to think I'm crucified alone. So do you need to go back to that cross memory and ask Jesus to help you see him and hear him in that memory? What was Jesus saying in that moment, in that experience? What was Jesus doing? And wait in the darkness of that memory in solitude to see what Jesus says, and to allow Jesus to be there with you in that memory, to somehow soothe your fear of losing everything, your fear of complete humiliation and abandonment. Not that Jesus is going to erase those memories, but that Jesus might have something to show you, something to say that brings healing to those memories, to change the meaning of those memories. And do you need to invite Jesus to heal your dreams? There are ways that you would say to Jesus, you are God's Messiah, and within that, it's actually a picture. It's the picture that you started painting when you were very young of the way you wanted your life to be and the way you wanted the world to be, and it was your version of gaining the whole world. Luke 24 depicts two disciples. After Jesus' death, they're walking along. They think Jesus is dead. Of course, we know he's resurrected. And he comes walking up to them. They don't realize it. And they are grieving their dreams. They said, we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. Similarly, do you need to grieve your dreams as you walk along the road with Jesus? Do you need to open up about your picture of gaining the whole world and learn to trust and accept that even if life doesn't look the way that you had dreamed, this life of following Jesus, not being ashamed of his words, of loving God, loving your neighbor, loving your enemy, practicing generosity, being kind, being merciful, praying for your enemies, treating others how you want to be treated, not judging, not condemning, storing up goodness in your heart, walking in this way of Jesus, that life can still be wonderful. And do you somehow need to come to a place of resting in that? I close with the words of C.S. Lewis. He says it this way: the principle runs through all life from top to bottom. Give up yourself and you will find your real self. Lose your life and you will save it. Submit to death, death of your ambitions and favorite wishes every day, and death of your whole body in the end. Submit with every fiber of your being, and you will find eternal life. Keep back nothing. Nothing that you have not given away will be really yours. Nothing in you that has not died will ever be raised from the dead. Look for yourself, and you will find in the long run only hatred, loneliness, despair, rage, ruin, and decay. But look for Christ, and you will find him, and with him, everything else thrown in. Thank you for joining us for a Sunday sermon from Netart's Friends Church. We hope you'll join us soon for one of our in-person worship gatherings. For more information, hop on over to netartsfriends.org. God's peace be with you, friends.